If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, what scary, creepy things have you seen or experienced in the middle of the night? When I went cycling and camping alone in Saguaro National Park, Tucson, Oz, which maybe wasn't the smartest thing to do by yourself. I was in my mid-20s and went specifically to look for and photograph animals, namely snakes, so I had no fear of creatures. I set up camp one night in a gravelly area, and was woken up in the middle of the night by footsteps approaching my tent in the gravel. What scared the living shit out of me, and kinda, sorry if this makes me sound like a coward, put me off camping alone forever, is that it really sounded like something very heavy and bipedal. Like a crazy person coming to me. Or Sasquatch. It approached my tent with slow, heavy footsteps crunching in the gravel. I didn't hear any other sound, no breathing or rustling of clothing. Just crunching gravel. There were just 2 footsteps, not 4. It came right up to the tent, then walked away, slowly. I have no idea what it was, and it may have been a mountain lion. They can walk pretty stealthily. But the thought of a human being walking around in the desert at night and slowly approaching me while I slept is what scared me the most, not the thought of an animal or monster. I wanted to call out hello, but was literally paralyzed with fear. I didn't sleep again that night, but came out at sunrise to find zero evidence, and just carried on with my trip without incident, but have not been camping alone since. When I was younger, 5 to 7 years old, I kept having the same dream for months. It started with me being in a black limousine with about 10, seemingly, rich, elderly white men. They were all popping champagne bottles and toasting each other. The chauffeur would drop me off at my house, the men would say bye, and I'd stand in front of my driveway. For some reason, I could hear every footstep coming from the inside of my house, and I could hear 2 sets of feet running around. I would hear my mom's blood-curdling scream, and then the sound of a, very terrifying, roar would follow her scream. I would always jolt awake right after that. I've never made it past that part. My family was staying at this haunted hotel in Savannah, GA. It was an old hospital during the Civil War or something like that, and my brother and I were sharing a bed. The first night, I woke up to him smashed up against the headboard, no noise and movement at all. When I asked him what he was doing, he said he was afraid to move because he wasn't entirely sure if he was dead or paralyzed. That he woke up to this enormous pressure and was pushed up against the headboard. Freaked me out, and I refused to share a bed with him again out of fear of another ghost attack. The next night, I was sleeping with my sister and she rolled over on me. I kept trying to push her off when I noticed she wasn't anywhere near my side of the bed. Almost peed my pants, and then watched TV until his son came up because duck ghosts. I'm 21 now, and until about a month ago I went 20 years of my life not knowing if ghosts were real. I would have absolutely loved to keep it that way too, but so much for that. A few weeks ago I was at an old lake house with a ton of friends. Me and one other guy claimed to single beds in one of the bedrooms. Apparently, this house belonged to one of my friend's grandparents who had both died in that house. At the foot of my bed up on the wall was this odd painting of a young woman. No idea who it was of. Anyways, I kept trying to sleep but kept hearing a weird breathing sound coming from the opposite side of the room, opposite side of where the other guy was sleeping too. Eventually I ignored it and almost fell asleep. Right before I was out, I swear it's as if someone grabbed the end of my bed and just shook it back and forth violently for a full couple of seconds. I have never gotten such bad chills. I looked around the room in the dark but didn't see anything, but for the life of me I could not even peek at that painting on the wall. Even if I looked out of my peripheral vision, I swear I could see the young woman looking at me. I got the weirdest, creepiest, most evil vibe coming off that thing. Somebody did not want me sleeping in that bed. Also, I stayed awake in the living room until the sun came up. I was out camping in the cold dark woods. I woke out of a sound sleep to hear something very large moving through the brush nearby. I reached for my knife, then I remembered I had left it outside the tent, by the fire, a good 20 feet from the tent. The rustling got louder, and there was a huge crack, as a branch broke. My mind was too eager to estimate the mass of an animal that could break such a large branch. Then it called out for the first time, "Narf." And then again, "Narf." Over and over, "Narf. Narf." I did not die that night. Nor did I ever come to know WTF makes a narf sound. When I was in middle school, my mom and I had a routine. She would wake me up an hour before school, I would get ready, then go take a nap for the precious few minutes I had left. I liked my sleep. So there I am in my room, under the covers, door closed, fan off, no animals in my room, air conditioner not on. Now I don't mean to brag, but my room was pretty messy back then. So I'm trying to fall back to sleep and I hear paper rustling. I was a paranoid kid back then cause weird stuff like this was always happening around my family. So I shoot up in bed and look around trying to figure out what made the noise. It sounded like someone had stepped on the paper. I don't see anything so I lay back down. A minute later I hear it again, and again I shoot up. Nothing. This happened 2 more times and still nothing. I know I'm not gonna get to sleep at this point, but I'm still trying. I'm laying there with my eyes closed listening for noises and not hearing anything for a few minutes, and I finally feel like I might get some more sleep. That's when the covers get yanked off of me. I did not take to this very well. Needless to say I got my ass up and watched TV in the living room while keeping an eye over my shoulder. Nothing else happened that day though. Stuff like that was always happening for years. Doors would close, things would spin in place, stereos would turn on, lights would turn on or off. Then eventually my mom divorced my dad and moved to New Hampshire. Once she was gone, it all stopped. As far as we can tell, whatever was happening only happens around her. To this day, whenever I visit her, I'm on my toes ready for something weird to happen. Scary shit, man. I was hiking with a buddy on the Appalachian Trail. We ended up hiking 100 miles and then called it quits. Anyways, we're in this town in Virginia that has like 1 grocery store and 1 gas station and that's it. Everything else is just mountains and trees. We're at this campground sort of thing, but it's not on the trail. So we hitchhike about half a mile away from it to the actual trail. We find our spot for our tents and set them up. There's a nice creek next to us. We end up smoking like 1 to 2 bowls and going to sleep. We went to bed around like 8 to 9. At about 1 a.m. it starts raining and it wakes us both up. But I hear what sounds like footsteps in the mud circle our tents. Just sounded like someone running in circles. Anyways, we both fall asleep again. But I wake up to piss at what had to be about 3 to 4 a.m. I unzip my tent and stand up, start pissing. But then I look up, and this is where I shit my pants. When I look up, there is a silhouette of something that's about 7 to 8 feet tall and about 3 feet wide. I could see it cause the moon was bright that night. This was also after the rain had stopped. I could tell it was alive because it wasn't standing completely still. Like if a person stand up and you stare at them, they are not completely still, their body sways just the slightest bit. But it was just staring at me. I don't even think a gun would have taken this thing down. I didn't walk up to it or make sudden movements. I just went back in my tent and picked up my knife. And I held it until the morning. I also found a large creek rock in the bottom of my backpack the same day. No idea how it got there. My best friend has always said the land where he lives was haunted by a number of spirits. I personally never seen anything, but I believed him. Anyways, I was staying the night at his house one night and we were inside playing Xbox and shit, when he asked me if I heard that. I had my headset on, so I said no. About 2 minutes later he hears it again, and so did I this time. So he, being paranoid, grabs his gun, hands me one too, and we go outside on the back porch. It's pitch black. We stood on the porch being quiet and we see this green light off in the woods. It looked kinda like a carved pumpkin but green glow. It looked tall, walking towards us. All we could see were eyes and mouth. We started to slowly back towards the door and it disappeared. We sat down to make sure it wasn't someone just ducking with us. When we heard loud footsteps coming from all around his house, slowly moving to us. And they started growling, not like anything I've ever heard. Wasn't dogs or coyotes or anything, this was evil. We still couldn't see, so we said duck it and ran back in. We acted like some lol. When I was a kid we had a family room with a wall that was almost all window. It faced our backyard, which butted up against a big field that allowed you to see for a long way to the left and right as you were facing it. One night I was in the family room watching TV, and I saw a flash outside. I looked out the window and I saw a light being shined on the ground from above. It was about 20 feet wide, and stretched as far as I could see to the left and right. My first thought was it was a helicopter, but there was absolutely no sound. As it moved to the back of our yard and into the field, I expected to see the ends of it while it passed over the field, but I didn't. I'd estimate I could see about 400 feet in either direction in the field, but the light stretched further in both directions than that, and I could see it on the tops of trees and houses next to the field. In addition, the light was bright. It was more bright than spotlights I've seen from helicopters, and it was uniformly that bright the whole way across. Never seen anything like it since, and my only guesses for what it could have been are in the realm of aliens. One of those awesome spring, summer nights, I couldn't sleep and had the windows open. I was sitting in the living room by one of the windows just enjoying the breeze and decide that it's an absolutely lovely night, the moon is full, and I'm going to go out in the way back of my yard to my sitting spot to soak in and enjoy the evening if I'm not going to be sleeping. I took my phone with me for the flashlight. So I'm sitting out there, listening to the breeze, night bugs and quietly burbling creek when I hear this chilling screamy screech that just sends a massive shot of adrenaline through me. I fumble my phone out and direct the flashlight in the direction of the woods. I pan it around and there is a set of eyes reflecting back at me. Thoroughly freaked out, I run back in the house. Now I've lived in the middle of nowhere in the woods my whole life and I have never heard anything like that in my life. After that incident, I'd hear it from time to time in the middle of the night when we had the windows open. I dub it the soul stealer. I have no clue what this thing could be. Fast forward to last summer. My husband and I go to his grandparents' lake house. We were sitting on the deep screened-in porch right as the sun was going down and we see a few deer come right up to the porch almost, a mom and 2 babies. We are being super quiet so we don't scare them but something scares them anyway. Mama throws up her tail and lets loose with, you guessed it, that unholy screech. In all my rural life I'd never heard a deer noise. I didn't even think they made noise. This is the single most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me, period. I should preface this story saying that this is one of the nights where I happen to stay up late. I am not an insomniac. With that out of the way, let's get started. I head into my parents' house, who of course were not home, around 10 p.m. which is a normal time for me to go to sleep, but I had an extreme amount of school work to do at the time so I had to stay up until around 2:30 a.m. During the time from 10 to 2:30 something just felt a little off, odd noises, small creaks around the room, goosebumps, normal horror movie cliché stuff. The school work is done so I stand up slowly from my office chair and lay down in my bed. I just keep laying there. Something is off, something is wrong and I can't figure out what it is. Ever alert in my brain was going off. I was sweating, shaking, and the hairs on my neck were officially up and screaming at me that something was wrong. For whatever reason I choose to ignore it and close my eyes to drift off to sleep right before I'm out in that stage where everything starts to blur and your eyelids feel like a 10-pound weight is attached to them. I hear someone or something yell boo. I jump out of bed and start running down the hallway. The whole way there I still hear it boo. 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 Then the same thing yells run faster. At this point I had run all the way downstairs out of my house and to my neighbor's house, who thankfully let me in to call the police. The police show up and search the house, guns drawn. They found nothing, not a trace that anyone had besides me had been there. I have no logical explanation for this. To this day I get a little freaked out when home alone and have a very hard time sleeping alone. I finally decided to go to bed. It was maybe 4 in the morning. I had a cat who, if she saw me gathering up my things to go to the bedroom, would scurry off and hide. So this night I thought I'd be clever and put her in the bedroom first before I picked up my stuff. I carried her to the bedroom and threw her in, gently obviously and low to the ground, with the intention of closing the door before she could run out. Instead of landing a foot or so away from me, she landed on my feet. I thought she'd twisted in the air or done some ninja cat maneuver or something. So I picked her up and deliberately threw her a little further than what I'd tried the first time. I watched as she flew forward and then flew in reverse, again landing on my feet. She looked up at me and then walked over to where she would have landed. Where she should have landed. She sniffed at the air and her head went back like she smelled something offensive. I didn't know what to do, so I just went to sleep and dreamt of mathematical equations all night long. I figure my brain was trying to come up with a logical explanation for what happened. I was in Puerto Rico at the time with a group of others. Our sleeping accommodations were on the floor. I woke up to someone saying it bit me, it bit me. In my slumber my first thought was ants. I wish it was ants. This person had a centipede crawl across their face while they were sleeping and grabbed it with their hand. The centipede proceeded to wrap around their hand, biting it, and drawing blood. They described the centipede as barbed wire walking across their face. This thing was pushing close to a foot in length and managed to escape before we could do anything about it. They had to be seen by a doctor for the bite and none of us slept on the floor again after that. We just put benches together to at least have a little feeling of safety. I hate centipedes. My first experience with sleep paralysis was one of the most traumatizing and jarring experiences of my life. It happened over 10 years ago, when I was in high school. I woke up to find that I couldn't move my body. I was laying on my back, with my head on my pillow looking towards the bedroom door. At first, it was like any other night for about a minute or two while I laid in bed. I didn't realize I couldn't move. When I discovered this fact, I instantly started panicking. This is when one of the most ducked up things I've ever experienced happened. I saw my mom come into the room. Everything was normal about her, except she had glowing red eyes, something straight out of the movies. She walked up to me slowly, until she was standing straight beside me. This is where the story gets really ducked up. I'm getting anxious as I type this out. I saw this figure, my mom with glowing red eyes, give me a blowjob. As she started doing this, I had the heaviest weight on my chest, and I couldn't understand what the duck was happening. I had never heard of sleep paralysis before, but even if I had, I'm not sure I would have been able to control my emotions. It was one of the worst feelings in the world, maybe the worst thing I've experienced psychologically. Thinking back, I can't recall how I snapped out of it. I just remember crying throughout the day, and having trouble sleeping for a couple months after. Luckily, I never experienced anything like that ever again. There's a legend that gets passed around in the American Southwest about a deadly sort of otherworldly creature. Some versions of the myth describe the monster as being a man-like shapeshifter, while others claim that it's curiously canine in nature. Albeit with 2 long limbs, black claws, and eyes that burn like pinprick embers in the darkness. One detail that always remains the same, though, is the eerie keening noise that the beast is said to make as it hunts down its prey. One evening when I was about 11 years old, I heard it. It started as a mournful howl that pierced the air from somewhere across the moonlit sands. My first thought was that it had been a coyote. But as the sound echoed through the night for a second time, I felt a bolt of panic flash up my spine and into my chest. That evil wail was not the call of anything that I had ever encountered, nor of something that should have even existed in the waking world. It was the cry of a nightmare incarnate, and no amount of reason or rationality could shake me of that notion. As I listened, the screeches seemed to draw closer and more frenzied. Almost before I was aware of what was happening, I started sprinting away from my bedroom, desperate to seek the protection of my parents. Upon reaching their door, though, I discovered something that truly terrified me. The howls were coming from inside the house. Along with a lot of heavy breathing and the occasional whisper. I couldn't look my mother in the eye for a week. When I was little, we used to go to countryside where my great-grandma lived. She was 101 years old and survived 2 Balkan Wars and 2 World Wars. Her husband was in captivity in World War I and fighting for Tito's partisans in World War II, along with my grandpa. Her other son ended up in Mauthausen concentration camp. So, the house was old and cheeky. The only room that was heated in winter was the one my great-grandma was in, so my parents would make me sleep in the same room with her, while they were sleeping in the freezer of a bedroom. It wasn't the squealing of the house, or the strange rhythm of an old clock, or the trains that passed by, or wild animals that talked throughout the night that kept me awake, but my great-grandma sleepwalking and talking through the night. She would sit up in her bed and have full conversations with long-lost friends. She would call for them or ask them for the directions, or tell them she missed them so much. But the worst was wailing for killed or mutilated ones. She would say things like, "Oh, look what they did to your beautiful eyes," or "Why didn't you stay hidden? Where could I find a doctor to stitch your stomach up?" I should have been more vocal about my great-grandma and claw my way in that cold room, in hindsight. I was a night shift truck driver for 15 years and I've seen some insane shit. I pulled up outside a Dunkin' Donuts that I was making a delivery to, at about 2:30 a.m. This place was in the middle of nowhere. A gas station that was closed for the night was the only other building within sight of this DD. As I pulled around the building to park, I noticed a woman sitting on the curb outside of the front door. This is never a good sign. Usually this type of person is batshit crazy at best, and looking to rob me at worst. I pocketed my stun gun and got out of the truck. The woman approaches me, and it was only then that I noticed that her shorts and the lower half of her t-shirt were absolutely covered in blood. She started screaming, "My boyfriend stabbed me," and kept repeating this phrase, changing words here and there but keeping the same idea intact. Pacing like someone on a huge dose of some sort of stimulant, she kept repeating the line about being stabbed. I got on the phone to 911 dispatch and let them know that she needed help, and during this conversation, I attempted to calm the woman down and get her to sit, told her she needed to wait for EMTs and that I had called 911 for her. The request I made for her to sit and learning that I had called 911 triggered something else in her, and instead of repeating herself, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "It ain't my blood and it could be yours too." I got back in my truck and locked the doors. She took off into the field that borders the lot that the DD is situated in. I moved my truck to keep her in the headlights until she disappeared into the woodline a few hundred yards away. The cops showed up before the EMTs, and I was forced to wait in my truck until the police conducted a search and questioned me. I was there until dawn. They did not find the woman I had reported, and if not for the bloodstains on the curb, would likely have not believed my story whatsoever. Junior year of college, I lived in the oldest residential dorm on campus. Naturally, the building had some ghost stories tied to it, but nothing crazy. The basement was creepy though, unfinished, ugly cement walls and floors, cobwebs hanging off of the old lighting, etc. The laundry facilities were down there and people would always try to get laundry done before it got too late at night because it was creepy there alone. There was also a locked door in the basement. Like many other students, I had a proclivity for exploring in college and I picked many locks to get into some fun places. I never had any luck with this one though, which was a bummer because I was very curious of it. It was kinda in the corner of the basement and couldn't have led to a very large room at all. It seemed so random, almost like a broom closet, but it wouldn't have made much sense to have a utility closet in the basement. I tried many unsuccessful times to get into that door. One day, after a string of long nights burning the midnight oil to finish assignments, I finally got work done early and was looking forward to some good sleep. Then a friend called with a personal problem and I walked to meet them. Then another friend called. Then after 1 a.m. a third messaged me. I am not a sociable person, so it was emotionally and mentally draining helping 3 friends in one night. I was happy to chat and I value being available to people, but it was such a strange, unlucky coincidence that 3 people needed me in one night. Particularly in the one night I was looking forward to early sleep. Oh well. So at around 2:30 a.m. I was walking back to my dorm, mentally drained and frankly annoyed that I was getting back so late. As I was fumbling with my keys to fob into the building, I felt this weird tingle on the back of my neck. Suddenly I felt an overwhelming desire to go down to the basement. The staircase leading to the basement is immediately inside the building. At first I thought I was subconsciously remembering that I left my laundry in the wash or something, but then I swear I felt a voice say, "Come down to the basement." I got into the building and just stood there, staring at the steps to the basement. It made no sense to go down there. Even worse, if someone was up late doing laundry, I'd seriously creep them out if I just moseyed down there for no reason. But that prickling feeling on my neck remained, and I swear I again felt a voice in my head urging me to go down to the basement, just for a moment. To be clear, this wasn't a scary moment. If anything, I was feeling excited. The best thing I can compare it to is when Harry Potter took Felix Felicis and said that he just felt like Hagrid's is the place to be. I knew I should go down the steps. Or at least it felt like something was telling me I needed to go to the basement, and so I did. I turned on the lights, saw no one at the washing machine. Nothing. I just stood in the middle of the basement floor, waiting a second or two for I don't know what. I felt like an idiot, but whatever, I was sleepy and it was time for bed. I turned around to go back up the stairs when I saw the locked door was wide open. I almost ran forward into it, but as I got closer I realized my assumption was right. It was a tiny room, barely bigger than a closet. But it was empty. Well, almost empty. It oddly had a single desk, like the small single desks for elementary school kids. So odd, so out of place. From the ceiling a single old light bulb was hanging over top the desk. The only other thing in the room, beside the desk, was an old beat-up computer chair. The kind that spins. And the damn chair was spinning. Slowly, but steadily enough that it wasn't from a draft. No one else in the basement, no one else in this weird tiny room, and it was spinning. I sprinted away up the stairs, sprinted up the 3 flights to my dorm, slammed my door shut and jumped into bed. I never tried picking the door open again, even in the safety of daytime. But I never again saw it opened, and I asked around without luck to see if anyone else ever saw in there. Me and my girlfriend/now wife were sleeping, and I sleep like a log, except sometime I'll wake up before some loud noise, like less than a second before but enough to notice. And this time I woke up to a loud branch cracking noise coming from the tree outside our window directly to the right of the bed. And I open my eyes and see this massive, ducking, owl. Like twice the size of me, as a guess, but definitely taller than me, staring straight at me. Wings slightly raised like it was going to fly straight through the window and into the house. For reference, our bedroom is on the 2nd floor. I quietly push my wife to wake her up and she stares at it for a while too, before it screeched loudly, and flew off. Turned out, my wife had seen it twice before, and thought it was just a lucid dream sort of thing. But she said she'd never heard it screech before, and that it sounded like somebody she knew, screaming. But she couldn't remember who. She was really shaken, and believe me when I say that nothing phases her, ever in the 17 years I've known, dated and married her. She barely even laughs, mostly just smile when she likes a joke, and as far as my memory goes, she has only laughed twice the whole time I've known her. So, this shattering her confidence made me feel lost. She had always been there to be my rock, so I decided to man the duck up and just pull up the comforter and cuddle with her until she fell asleep. Bonus story, I had a recurring dream that same night about a black figure so tall that when he sat in a chair his knees reached the ceiling. Same as the other occurrences, caressing the spot where my head was, and as other times, I felt the presence of my grandfather on my mother's side, who died before I was born. My mom would tell stories about how well we would have got along. It was comforting. I slept the best I have in a long while that night. Not the spookiest, but very unsettling at the time. I was 19, dumb, and decided to walk to the store for some snacks at 11 p.m. It wasn't far, but there was one part of the route that involved a footpath through the woods, down a steep hill, around a blind corner and over a bridge. No lights. This section was only about 100 yards long, but at the midpoint you were completely hidden from view in both directions. Like I said, I was dumb. I was also a crazy cat lady. I knew every cat in the neighborhood. I'd often bring them treats and whatnot. That night the cats were acting weird. My kitty stood on the porch meowing pitifully until I was out of earshot, which was unusual. It got weirder because from that point on a cat was always next to me. As soon as I got to a corner they'd get right in front of my feet and meow until another cat showed up and followed me for the next block. It was cute at first, but I started getting kinda creeped out. Then I got to the start of the dark footpath. A cat I'd never seen before was just sitting there like it was waiting for me. It was really friendly, but as I tried to walk it kept getting underfoot, winding around my legs, etc., becoming more pushy the closer I got to that blind corner. I got this powerful feeling like the cat was trying to tell me to turn back. I thought it was ridiculous, but I decided I'd turn around and walk back the way I came a little ways to see what happened. As soon as I turned around the cat stopped getting in the way and followed politely behind me. Instantly changed its behavior 180 degrees. That spooked me enough to give up on snacks and go home. Footpath cat stopped at the trailhead and I got my kitty on her guard all the way home, where my cat was still waiting on the porch. I never saw footpath cat again. But the night after this, a different girl was beaten and stabbed multiple times on the bridge I didn't cross. I was on a long road trip in Alaska, on the Dalton Highway a little south of the Brooks Range. I hadn't seen anyone all day. I stopped for the night at a bridge that crossed a medium-sized river and was going to fry up some grayling that I had caught earlier that day. I got out the fry pan and built a fire, and let my 2 dogs out of the truck, and was flouring the fish when I noticed that both dogs, Airedales, had gone absolutely upright and had moved to the edge of the clearing. Both looking in the same direction. I looked, but didn't see anything, but they hadn't ever done that before. So the fish start frying, and I see my 2 dogs, that up to now had been completely fearless, start to growl and walk backwards towards the fire. It's 2 a.m., but twilight, so I can see, but I don't see anything. Both dogs are walking backwards towards me, growling. I'm getting scared. I'm not sure what is out there. The dogs are now about 20 from the fire, but they keep walking backwards, never changing their stance. I cannot see what it is. I don't hear anything. I don't smell anything. No idea what it is. I take the fry pan with the fish and toss it into the back of the truck, and then the dogs, and when I pick them up they are absolutely tense. Like stone. I run to the truck and drive away. I'm so freaked out I drive 60 miles before I stop. Never did figure out what it was, animal, spirit, hallucination. Whatever. I had to leave. I will not stop at that place again. This was in spring, TX in 2008. I just graduated HS and it was the summer before college. I was working at local pizza joint that delivered until 3 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. We got an order S out 5 minutes before closing in S rural area at least 25 minutes away. I offered to do the delivery because the customer promised a $20 tip and I needed the money. It took me almost an hour to find the place, so almost 4 a.m. My boss said I could drive straight home after the delivery. This house had no neighbors. It was smack dab in the middle of the woods. When I arrived the first thing I noticed was all the lights were off and the front door was wide open. I approached the door and knocked even though it was open. No answer. Knocked again, still no answer. Finally I shouted Johnny's Pies. I heard a voice say something but I couldn't make it out, so I entered the lightless house. Stupid, I know. I walked in, said it again, Johnny's Pies. The voice was louder but still couldn't make it out, but I could tell it was coming from upstairs. I approached the stairs but I wasn't about to go up in a stranger's house. I said, I'm leaving it on the stairs. At this point I don't give a duck about the tip, I just want to go home. The voice said, no, bring it upstairs. Only it wasn't a normal voice. I don't know how to describe it, but it sounded like an animal learning how to talk. Think Scooby-Doo but not funny or cute. I politely said it was against company policy, not sure where I got that, and turned to head out. The person upstairs started stomping in anger and demanded I come upstairs. The stomping sounded heavy, like a horse or something. I bolted back to my car and drove off. My car was piece of shit and I only made it about 200 feet before my car stalled. I panicked and tried to get it going again. Thank God it did. As I was driving off I looked in the rear view mirror and saw what looked like a tall skinny lanky man standing in the road by the house. I quit the next day. When I was like 9 to 10 years old, I used to sleep with my door open. One night at about 3 a.m. I woke up to giggling and laughing of a little girl. I turned around so I could see if someone's standing like in my doorframe or somewhere near. But I saw nothing, so I decided I'll go back to sleep. About an hour later I woke up again, to even louder giggling, laughing and screaming. But I couldn't stand up, probably because I was too scared, so I tried ignoring the sounds and went back to sleep. The next day I told my mom about what happened the night before. She said she didn't hear anything. Neither did the rest of my family. They told me I was imagining things, so I asked if the man that owned this house before us had maybe like a daughter. He didn't. I told my friends about the things I heard, but they also didn't believe me. I'm going to find out about this. I was living in this really old house while I was in college. I was up late one night in the living room watching TV and decided to just sleep on the couch. At some point in the wee hours of the morning my phone buzzed with a text message and it woke me up. I opened my eyes and in the corner of the room I was making out a figure that slowly materialized into an old lady in a nightgown just standing there staring at me. I closed my eyes and said I was probably just imagining it. I rolled over and went back to sleep. I then woke up again, and there she was, only now I could make her out better and she had what looked like black holes for eyes that were sucking in light, if that makes sense. I again just told myself I must be dreaming, so I rolled over with my face to the back of the couch, but then I felt her hand scratching my back. I rolled over and she was right there in my face with a look like she was screaming at me with no sound. I jumped up and ran to my room and shut the door and was completely freaked out and couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. That was the last time I ever slept in that living room. I was raised in the country on a cattle farm. No matter what we did, we always would have to deal with something getting in the house or getting loose. One night, when I was about 17, I went to a party with friends and came back home a little intoxicated. So I marched straight to my bedroom and passed out. I completely forgot, or didn't care that the light in my room was still on and fell asleep. At approximately 3 in the morning I get woken up to something hitting the wall above my headboard and my eyes shoot open, but I don't see anything. Then out of nowhere a small white alien with big black eyes staring directly at me jumps from the end of my bed directly onto my chest. At this point I am freaking out, and even though I am a manly man, I let out the most girlish scream imaginable and punch the thing right in the face. It screams and runs off out of my room on both legs and proceeds down the hall. I get out of bed still terrified, but it's headed for my little sister's room. I grab a baseball bat and go after it. As soon as I exit my room the alien is flying through the air directly at my face. I never hit the ground so hard in my life. It flew directly above me and hit another wall. That's when I realized it was a gigantic barn owl that somehow found its way into my house. The feeling of relief when I put that together was amazing. I ended up getting a fishing net and catching him and released him outside. I have been a sleepwalker all my life. I've walked as far as across the street and I've even sleep pissed in the closet. My room was just as any 8-year-old's room was. It had ugly, old stuffed animals around the floor/bed, posters of current musicians and Pokemon characters, a few nightstands, and a dresser positioned across the corner of my room, so that both of the back corners were touching the wall and there was a small triangular gap behind it. This was an extremely heavy dresser, about 7 feet tall. It had 4 large shelves on top of a set of 4 large drawers, and was made of the heaviest oak you could find. One night when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I had a frightening nightmare where there were eyes behind my dresser and they were trying to lure me towards it. They called me by name and told me once I got there, all my terrors would be relieved. I woke up screaming and my parents were in my room frantically trying to find me. I was behind the dresser where the eyes were telling me to go. It took what felt like 20 minutes for my parents to move the dresser aside and, after moving it, we saw 2 eye marks on the back. They were marks made by my own wide open eyes that I had pressed against the back of the dresser. To this day I don't understand how I got behind the dresser, but what was even more surprising is that not only was I not strong enough to move it so that I could get behind it, it was moved back into its original place, trapping me in. A few years ago I lived in a lonely old farmhouse in Tornado Alley, USA. One morning I woke to an incredible roar of wind. I immediately thought it was a tornado. The house was shaking and the windows were rattling, so it had to be right on me. I rolled off the bed and landed on the dog, which I scooped up and dragged under the bed with me. I was terrified that a tornado was moments from destroying my house and killing me. In seconds the wind died down and I got out from under the bed to find that there was nothing but a light rain. I ran downstairs to see what happened. When I got to the north side of the house, I found that it had rained torrents. The wind had driven rain under the front porch, about 5 feet deep, and horizontally through some open windows into and across the living room. The couch was soaking wet and the floor was sopping with water as far as 12 feet in from the windows. It was like someone pointed a fire hose into our house for a few seconds. Since there were wood floors, I spent about half an hour mopping up and drying the couch and floors as best I could. Later, I went outside and found that the wind had laid a patch of nearly grown corn stalks down flat on the ground, but in something of a straight line from the north. There was no other damage, and to this day, I have no idea what happened. I chalked it up to freak weather. I like to walk late at night, in open areas so I can see across the street or across empty lots if there's danger coming my way before it gets to me, and I keep reminding myself to scan every car that I see for danger signs. It plays out very well, trust me. Anyways, I see a car stopped in the middle of the street from across an empty lot. I keep walking around the lot and he circles his car from behind me and passes me and stops around the corner ahead. My spidey sense starts to tingle, but I play cool and I walk past him and I can see it is one guy in the car. He waits a bit and drives away and I see where he went. 5 minutes later he comes back from that same street and drives head to head to me while I'm walking, and I start walking slowly and he stops. There is some distance and I peel my eyes. I see a passenger next to him now, and he's eye-locked with me. The driver gets out of the car and goes to the back of it, but I can't see him anymore. I tell myself these are two people now, so the situation is becoming sketchy. Then all of a sudden a hooded person with his face covered with a mask gets out from the rear door. That's when I decided to not play it cool, so I take a hard U-turn and make a run for it, and I take a small street I know of, because I know it's so small they can't drive their car through it. I keep running till I get home. I never walked late at night again. My family used to have several dozen magnets tacked onto our old fridge. Magnets from Yosemite and Yellowstone, from NYC and Disneyland, ABCs and 123s, and so on. We were gifted or picked up at a garage sale a toy violin magnet. With a little wire bow attached, you could play the violin with the bow and it was a lot of fun. It didn't play actual notes, the violin would just emit a single note for as long as you held the wire bow to the strings. I almost always wake up in the middle of the night to go pee, and back when I lived at home, my room was the closest to the kitchen, and I'd pass the kitchen on my way to the bathroom. So one night, I wake up like I usually do, go pee, and amble sleepily back to my room. I get back into bed, and I'm 75% asleep, when suddenly that toy mini violin on the kitchen fridge turns on, or starts making its sound, or whatever, and all I hear is that one note, sustained over what seems like minutes and minutes. No one else in my family ever wakes up in the middle of the night, and even if they did, why would they duck around with noisy toys at 3 a.m.? And the violin doesn't make its sound unless you physically press the bow to the strings with your own hands. I want to go into the kitchen and turn the violin off somehow, take out the batteries? Throw into the trash? Who knows, but I'm also petrified that I'll see someone standing in front of my fridge, playing the violin. I'm completely frozen, and I'm hoping that maybe the violin noise will wake up my parents and they'll turn it off, but nope, the parentals and my sister don't seem to stir at all. I just cower in my bed and sweat for a bit, and then I must have fallen asleep. The next day, I asked my family if they heard the violin magnet playing last night, and they didn't hear anything. I'm assuming that the wiring in the violin got messed up or the noise-making part just went haywire for a few minutes. But I was glad when we got a new stainless steel exterior fridge and my parents got rid of all the magnets. Was staying out at the ranch one weekend. I took my Chiweenie and Boston Bull with me. I wake up in the middle of the night, that's weird. I live next to the tracks in town, and I sleep through trains. The first thing I noticed was that my Chiweenie was curled up next to me shaking in fear. She isn't afraid of anything, so I grab the 12 gauge by the bed and get up. My Boston Bull is cowering under the bed, and I tell myself it's game on, something isn't right. I flip the porch light, but nothing is powering on, so I go outside, only to find all the outside dogs hiding under the porch. Then I hear it. Hum. I turn to the east, shotgun ready, and there's nothing there. That's when I notice something weird. Mom has a crapload of solar lights. You know the kind, the cheap ones that have a small solar panel to charge during the day, and they light up at night. No batteries. Anyways, she has maybe 100 of them, and none of them are on. And there's no power. I hear the noise again, I swing to the south. Nothing. My hair stands on edge. I go back inside, and grab a battery-powered flashlight. Dead. The next two are the same way. I go room to room, clearing the house. Once I see it's empty, I get all the dogs inside. We all doze off, but I wake up once more to the loud hum. Next morning, power is back. All the dogs act normal, all the flashlights work. The battery-powered clock on the wall is 4 hours 26 minutes behind actual time. I go out and cover the light sensors of a few solar panels, they work. I try to clear my mind by going and getting the game cameras, I'll see if any wildlife were out and about the night before. They all took a static-filled shot a little after midnight, and then nothing. There were no visible insects or wildlife in the pictures. The cameras are motion activated, so I'm not exactly sure what they all took a photo of, all at the exact same time. 4 had some people tell me it was a transformer, but this noise was far too loud and a complete different tone. I used to play video games in my basement when I was younger, with the lights off of course. Well, I started hallucinating things because of a lack of sleep and staring at the TV all day long. Crazy stuff. Anyways, the handle of old wooden door we had in the far back of the basement started to rattle and shake on its own, and then slowly opened and made that creepy creaking sound. It was completely pitch black in there. I then saw a long black arm with thin, foggy fingers start to slowly reach out and climb along the wall, and then I saw 2 eyes peep put from behind the door. I immediately forgot about whatever game I was playing and ran as fast as I could up the stairs and locked the door. That thing scared the hell out of me. Learned my lesson not to play video games for too long, especially late in the night in a creepy basement.